Welcome Home, a podcast for veterans, about veterans by veterans, is a project of Willing Warriors and the Warrior Retreat at Bull Run.
Good morning. I'm your host, Larry Ziliox, Director of Culinary Services here at the Warrior Retreat at Bull Run. And today our guest is Jim Hatch. He's the Director of Partnership Marketing for the Purple Heart Foundation. It's an awesome organization. Well, we're going to get into what a Purple Heart is and who receives it, how they receive it, what the foundation does. So I'm really looking forward to talking about everything that the Purple Heart Foundation does. And I've looked at the webpage, and you guys do quite a bit. It's really a great organization. So, Jim, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Larry. Great to be here.
So let's start with what a Purple Heart is. How does a soldier get one?
I think history is a big part of that answer, and that it being George Washington that at the day looked at a way that he could honor not just officers, but all military personnel. And he created the Purple Merit Badge. We know that 3 were given out. It was for meritorious acts of courage and valor above and beyond. And of the 3 that he gave out, there is one in existence today that is up in New York in the Purple Heart Hall of Fame.
Wow.
But the medal, to your point, really sat dormant after the Revolutionary War. And it wasn't until after World War I that it was General MacArthur, who was then a younger officer, but a 2-time Purple Heart recipient himself, was tasked with repurposing the medal. So this is where the George Washington bust, purple dye that was synonymous with what Washington had given. Just on that note, it was purple because purple was a very difficult dye to get back in the 1700s. Most of the colors were browns or grays or other colors in general. It was known that Washington had an affinity to purple because of the royalty, and that is why that color was still consistent with today's medal. But that medal went out, the first and second medal went to General MacArthur himself as a Purple Heart recipient, and it became known as the Combat Medal, the Combat Wounded Medal.
Right.
And that is shedding your blood on foreign soil by enemy fire.
So it sounds as though the original award that Washington had come up with sort of turned into the Medal of Honor because it's different than what a Purple Heart is, of course. And basically, in a nutshell, I think Purple Heart is for combat wounded.
Correct. I think based on the number of soldiers in World War I that were combat wounded, that is where that medal MacArthur felt like, especially being combat wounded himself, that this is how they can distinguish that medal to move in that direction.
Wow. Do you know how many Purple Hearts have been given out? Does anybody keep track of that?
Department of Heraldry has in certain ways tracked some of that info, but there have been, we know, storage facilities that have caught fire and burned. So no, there is no real specific number. There's some guesstimates of where that is. I think the thing that's probably most compelling in some of the history was that based on World War II and the number of combat wounded soldiers, they continued to make the medal under the caveat that they thought at the time they would have to invade Japan. And they made the majority of those medals that were then, because not used, were given out to the Korean conflict as well as to Vietnam soldiers.
Wow.
So even though that medal, some of those Vietnam soldiers would have, they were potentially made back in the 1940s based on the combat wounded soldiers and projections.
And the Department of Heraldry, is that what you call it?
Correct.
That sounds like an old organization. Is that something that's around today?
It is. And in fact, they're very particular about how medals are used, because certainly they don't want any degradation happening along those lines or people disrespecting those medals. So even we as the foundation have certain requirements that we have to abide by that are not utilizing the full scope of the medal.
Is that a DOD function or?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know if I'd know. Yes, I would believe so.
Yeah.
To answer that, I believe so, but I'd have to do some fact checking to find that out.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. That's awesome. And are they the people that decide which way ribbons and honors are displayed? And
correct.
Okay. All right. Now I get it.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm sure that's DOT.
Yeah, that's why
I don't know who else. I don't think, Department of Fisheries would be interested in that. So,
well, in today's day and age, Congress wants to get involved in some way or another as well.
yeah,
Potentially.
yeah. So, I don't think many people really realize the history of the award and how important it is. Are Purple Hearts awarded to soldiers who have died in combat?
They are.
They are. Okay.
Correct. They're presented to the families.
To the family. Okay.
Correct.
So now, how old is the foundation? When did the foundation start?
We were set up in 1957.
Ooh, that's the year I was born.
Okay.
Wow. So it's old.
Not that old.
Oh, I don't know. It seems pretty old.
Well, it seems like we've been doing this for a while, but that's a good thing.
Yeah. Wow. So who set it up? How did it come to be?
So Tina in our office is probably the one that we always laugh and joke about, knows where all the bones are buried. There was a gentleman by the name of Dick Gallant that my understanding is Dick was with the Order. And let's be clear, the Order are those that are members that are Purple Heart recipients. Here's the easiest way that I can explain that here locally that may make some sense.
Yeah.
Springfield, in the Springfield Legion, is the largest in the state, and there are 1,587 members.
Wow.
Based on that, there are a little over 200 that have registered as Purple Heart recipients. The Legion there is the 176. The Purple Heart Order is the 353. So in this particular instance, again, Legion owns the building, but the Purple Heart recipients are some of the most valued that are there based on the fact of being combat wounded soldiers. So they have actually put a parking spot that's painted with the Purple Heart, has the Purple Heart sign. So they, of course, receive some of the premier parking there at the Legion. But that 353 group meets out of that Legion on a monthly basis.
Wow.
And around the country, this is why you'll have other Purple Heart chapters that then would be in different states, each doing different things to reach out to their community and support veterans in need.
So I have seen that Purple Heart parking sign in a lot of places now. It seems like in the last year or so, it's sprung up, at Target and Giant and these places. Are they the ones responsible for that?
In a lot of cases, it is.
Yeah.
It's the local chapters that said, hey, based on my connections to these facilities, this is something we'd like to do. And some of that goes because of the consistency of the Purple Heart highways and other things that are also the Purple Heart Trail that was initially from George Washington's house in Mount Vernon.
Right.
These types of things as well.
Wow. So tell me about the foundation and the work that the foundation does today. When I looked at the webpage, it was pretty clear you guys are doing a lot. There's all sorts of grants available. There's service dog assistance, resources. The webpage is full of resources, and we'll talk about the webpage in a little bit. But what's the main focus of the work that the foundation does today?
Yeah, great question. So let me share, if I can, kind of how we got there, because I think this will make a little bit more sense. And I use the term pivoting the foundation today because I think that really resonates based on the number, as you know, of military nonprofits that are all doing great work.
Yeah.
But everybody, in certain cases, has a specialty, or in other cases, we're overlapping a little bit.
Yeah.
So this is why partnerships, pivoting, and some of these things make sense. The story that I tell for a lot of people is, to your point, an understanding most people have of the Purple Heart medal is, in talking to just somebody generally on the street that you'd walk up to and say, tell me, what do you think it is? Then most make the case for, well, it's a military thing, or I think it's combat something, or George Washington had something to do with it. Or on the flip side, we get specifically, oh, I know exactly what it is. My father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my uncle, my neighbor, my best buddy in high school. There's a connection to say, yep, I know exactly what the medal is. And in fairness, you talk to a Purple Hearter and they'll say it's the medal that nobody wanted, or it's the medal that gave a point to the other team. But that said, the question that I found in joining the foundation and working with them off and on throughout the years is, when people ask, what is it we do? Then they tend to go, ooh, you help veterans. Or, well, I gave my car to you guys, or my dad donated a car. My mom gets the clothing pickup that you guys do with clothing. The good news is those opportunities that we found back in the 50s were unique to us at the time.
Yeah.
But I think, in today's day and age, you have a jingle or two that talks about donating a car, or you see a cardboard piece of paper that says we'll pay cash. It's crowded space.
Yeah.
And when you look at some of the charity navigators and charity watches of the world, because you're working with a for-profit business, the case that I saw very quickly is A, it being crowded space and competitive. B, people aren't really donating their cars as much.
Mm-hmm.
But in paying for an auction house and paying for a tow truck and paying for scrap metal prices, you get dinged because it's pennies on the dollar that get to the veteran.
Yeah.
We're blessed to have good partnerships. So cars and different companies that we work with, cars.com, as well as our friends at Green Drop and Savers on the clothing side.
Yeah.
It still is generous revenue that's generated by people making generous donations.
Yeah.
However, the pivot part comes into play. To your point, I share with people we have service dogs. We sponsor 2 of them. And the reason we do that is because through board members, through Purple Hearters, we appreciate there's a role that those dogs fill.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, we also know we don't have kennels and I don't have trainers. And I'm not about to go invest or to do all of that because there are other companies that do it and do it very well.
Yeah.
Veterans Moving Forward was Gordon Sumner, that being a part of that was a Purple Heart recipient.
Oh.
So it was a way to work within the community to give back. And in fairness, we have an elderly board that we know occasionally we lose 1 or 2. And as unfortunate as that is, to be able to name a dog in their honor, to be able to pass that along to the veteran in need is a win-win.
I will say that my sister is a veteran, and she received her dog Prince through Veterans Moving Forward.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful organization, and Gordon is a great, amazing guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's part of that 353 chapter that I know allows us to do projects together. And Angelo over there, just some great people doing great things.
Yeah.
Now, to the additional, what I call 4 pillars of what we work with. Service dogs, 1. The second for us is scholarships. That's important. And it's important because we appreciate the people that are playing a role in that process. We're teaching them to fish.
Mm-hmm.
We're helping them get the tools that they appreciate and understand. The power of education will forever open doors as they move through that process. The difference is we are making those available to Purple Hearters, Purple Heart spouse, Purple Heart descendants, or grand-descendants. But we're also looking at today's world because not everybody's going to college these days, and that's not a bad thing.
Right.
The ability to look at the skills and different trades and things that are important, certainly on the culinary side, and some of lots of different ways that things play a role. We're looking at computer and technology and cybersecurity. The benefit of this, and also just with education, we're seeing you don't have to be in a dorm to be able to be educated. You can take classes in the evening, part-time. You may have a full-time job, but as a veteran transitioning, it's the first job you took that was available because you needed to provide for your family, but it's not what you're passionate about.
Right.
So the ability to utilize some other scholarships and outreach is something we're focusing on and part of that pivot that I make reference to. The third one for us, this one's time sensitive, and it's something that every day you wake up knowing we've got to make a difference. And they're what we classify as critical assistant grants. It's a one-time $2,500 way at which we work with a veteran. We validate honorable discharge, DD 214, and then we work directly with creditors. But the case that I share, 70% of the calls that we get on a weekly, monthly basis are utilities, rent, mortgage, if not paid, that veteran's evicted. 20% of that is automotive. If I can't get to and from work, if my tree cutting business and my truck didn't pass inspection or my radiator blew up, if there are other issues that don't allow you to be able to make that the priority based on health care or other things that you may be dealing with, we appreciate that that's real. And part of the reason in talking with LJ on your staff and some others, 10% of those calls are for food insecurities and health care. So part of our grant, and this is why I say the concerning part of this, is we allocate funds for that on an annual basis. And then we open up these grants on a quarterly basis. In the first 3 to 4 weeks, we've exhausted that money. the need of the veterans today is greater than what we're seeing based on all of the things that are happening in our world today.
Sure.
So again, our approach in pivoting is to look at partnerships and look at ways that we can start to create our own little working ecosystems of people that win just by being a part of the process.
Yeah.
Example to that, a gentleman by the name of Duncan Morley. Duncan has a company called Give Credit. We have now moved over our accounts through his system. But in fairness, Duncan saw very quickly that he didn't want to be a company through credit card processing that just beats your rate. He wanted to look at ways that he could make a bigger difference. And having veterans on staff and one of the founders of the company with him, they created a way at which 25% of the processing fee would go back to a charity of your choice. So just by moving in some of our own transactions and using his services is putting additional revenue back in our coffer every month. The ability to work with veteran-owned businesses that say, hey, we want to give a process to give back, and if it cuts my rates and I can give back as a charitable write-off, it's a win-win. So I certainly want to look at ways that we can do that. So the second company that we recently partnered with is a company called Charitable Pay Raise. What I love about the work that Bill Lloyd's doing and his team there is they appreciate that if I'm a veteran and I retire and have retirement pay, but now I'm working here in D.C. as one of the Beltway bandits working with the large government contracting community, and I do that for another 15 to 20 years. When I go to retire and cash in my 401k or look at additional investments that I've had, I'm going to pay a premium because of the revenue that I have, versus if I set up my own LLC corporation and make again, charity of choice, there's an opportunity to keep those funds and to use those funds for your business that you may be setting up or different things that you're able to work through with your tax, specifically your individual tax attorney or accountant to work with you, CPA or others that can help you in that process. And what we're finding again is trying to look at smart solutions that for the veteran's sake, and this is kind of the direction we talk about, if I'm not paying my mortgage, but I have a new F-150 truck in my driveway, then I think we can all assess, wait a minute, something's not right.
And priorities there.
Right. Yeah. You're not thinking in the right direction. However, if you've lost a loved one, if you've just been laid off, and based on those expenses, you're trying to get back on your feet. If we can bring in a team of people that are actually helping to make a difference, to understand what you're going through, those are the resources and the pivot that we make reference to that we want to bring and be a part of the problem and make that part of the solution.
Right.
That's the direction we're heading in some of the critical assistance grants and really looking at the partnerships that can come in and help in there.
For a critical assistance grant, the soldier, the veteran, has to have a Purple Heart. And are there any other requirements with it? Like, is there a financial training component to it, or do you have to meet certain criteria? What other concerns are there?
Great question. Well, the first one is I'll share. It's not just Purple Hearters. So this is why I say the need is bigger. And
Right.
we recognize that. So the case that we make is part of our mission now has been to help all veterans that are in a time of need, because we know that need is that great. Certainly, we know if you're a Purple Hearter, we want to prioritize and look at ways that we can be of service to you and your family. The second part of that is, yes, we see that this money makes a difference, but we've talked internally that in certain cases, it's a Band-Aid approach. In other words, with the need being greater and how we're having to morph into what those needs are, this is why we're trying to partner with those people, the individuals or large corporations, small, medium. A lot of these are veterans. I have a veteran mortgage company we're talking to right now that said, hey, if 70% are having problems with utilities, rent, mortgage, we're mortgage experts. Let us come in and look at this. Maybe they can refinance to save some money and look at other ways that they can be put back on a road to recovery.
Yeah.
So, and then outside of that, I'll use an example on a personal note. I have a sister that got into the industry years ago, and based on that, was a major help to my father, being a career veteran.
Mm.
Case I'm making is our father didn't buy a house until the 70s when he was going to retire here in the DC area. I think interest rates back then were 17%.
Yeah.
But at the same time, having that house, retiring, becoming one of those Beltway bandits we talked about, he was in cryptology communication, so was able to transition fairly easily.
Mm.
But my sister, being in the industry, started to help to educate him on some of the things that he needed to do when he started to reach his second retirement. And that's what allowed him to buy a townhouse as an investment down the road.
Mm-hmm.
You know, granted, he had to pay off putting kids to college and all the things that were part of that transition in the process.
Mm-hmm.
But respectively, it was a way that, again, he was educated to look at making investments. And that's the same thing we're trying to do in that process.
Mm-hmm.
Who are the people that we know are committed to coming up with solutions to help veterans and families in need?
Yeah. That transitioning period is really a vulnerable time for many soldiers, especially if they're having trouble finding employment, because financially that just trickles down. They can't get the car repaired. Their rent's overdue. There's all sorts of issues that result from that. Is the critical assistance grant available to that Purple Heart recipient priority-wise, and then a veteran during that period where they just need that help to get on their feet, or is it farther down the line where they're just on the verge of getting evicted? Is there a criteria for that at all?
So Tina on our team is mentioned, the young lady that's been with us for a little over 40 years. Tina is the one that fields all these calls. And God bless her, she's dealing with veterans in a time of need that are most vulnerable.
Yeah.
And they're looking for any and all solutions. Part of the process when I say a Band-Aid to a bigger picture, unfortunately, we do have some veterans that call back the next quarter, say, I need another $2,500.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not able to fulfill that because we know that for those we haven't worked with in the past, they need outreach as well.
Yeah.
So this is why we're trying to circle back with those veterans to say, okay, where are you now? And what additional things might you need? And how can we continue to be a resource?
Yeah.
And again, some of that is me every day trying to find additional people that have that expertise to say, would you be willing to partner with us and offer services to help these veterans?
Yeah. So, yeah, it would be great to be able to bring almost like a whole program of resources and even training if it's financial assistance. I know we're looking at partnering with Burke and Herbert to offer financial training courses to transitioning veterans to say, okay, now it's time you want to go buy a house. This is what you got to look for. You're going to need insurance. You got to think about, whatever the cost of your house is, this is the percentage of what it's probably going to cost you a year to maintain it. Just to even think like that, because all of the things that were done for them when they were in the military are no longer being provided. One of the biggest hurdles I see is people who are in need of professional services, lawyers, accountants. It's a real hurdle for them to pay for those services because usually they just go down to the legal and hand them the problem, and then legal would take care of it. And now they have to pay a lawyer to do that. And very often they're like, oh, I don't want to pay a lawyer, so it'll just go away or whatever. And just trying to say, look, in this world,
Right.
You have to pay for a lawyer, and it's worth paying for a lawyer to deal with your problem. So I get that. That is a huge issue for what you guys want to do, is to try and partner with organizations to bring varying services to that veteran or family member of a Purple Heart who's reached out and needs that financial assistance. Because if the core issue isn't addressed, you're right, they're going to be back again. And there's situations where you're never going to be able to fix it, because on top of all of that, you may have medical issues like TBI and PTS. And then on top of those, you have veterans who self-medicate with alcohol and drugs. And so the situation can very easily spiral out of control. But I can see for those veterans who who are just having problems transitioning. The grants and the services that you guys provide are really a lifeline to a future.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I can tell you again, the letters that we received back from veterans that have said, hey, it was a tough time. You helped me through this when I had nowhere else to go. No doubt we're making a difference.
Mm-hmm.
But when I say the need's bigger than that, this is why I'm really trying to look at additional ways. And I'll use my sister again as an example of this. Becky went on to be one of the first female branch managers in some of the firms that she worked with, which was unique in and amongst itself, based on the financial industry and the time at which women were getting into the industry. But fast forward in a way that she can give back. She's reached out through Fairfax County Schools. So when my children were going through the middle school era, they have something called Finance Park. You and I grew up where our parents said, you're going to open a checking account. You're going to come with me to the bank. You're going to sign this up. We're going to do the book together. So to make sure you're not bouncing checks in the small little community or wherever we lived in the military.
We used to put quarters in this blue book and then take the blue book down to the bank, deposit it.
That's exactly right.
It's a while ago.
Right. But today, unfortunately, that's not being offered through our education system. And in this particular case, Fairfax County's done a great job to create, I think it's a 3-day program that's set up. But to your point, these are 6th through 8th graders that come in, they draw a card, and based on the profession they have, they then have to manage that money. And as we all know, when you're in 6th through 8th grade, I want a Ferrari and I want a huge house and I want it to have a pool and, this is...
And a pony.
Exactly right. So the reality, when you sit down with your financial planner, they go, ooh, don't think you can have all of this. However, here's how maybe one day you might be able to.
Yeah.
That same concept again is how do we help? Because there's that percentage of veterans that we know are having a difficult time, whether it be through the transition and how that money translates and transfers to the new income that they're starting to make, to maybe the birth of a second or third or fourth child. So lots of different things that can play a role. And this is why I say short term, it's keeping me up at night, but long term, I think there's a great opportunity to partner with a lot of individuals that want to help. That when I mention an ecosystem, to have veterans in the veteran mortgage industry, to have, again, veterans that are financial planners, veterans insurance agents, veterans, all different ways, or those that maybe grew up again in military families that want to give back to help our veterans. We'd love to have those conversations because there's a lot of heavy lifting to do still.
Yeah, and I don't know what it's like today in the various branches of the service, but I don't think they're getting this financial fiscal responsibility training while they're in the service. I think that's a pretty low priority for the military. I don't see them spending their money on trying to teach these young service members how to manage their money and to not get into incredible debt with credit cards. And I remember being in Guam, and I remember being in the base exchange at customer service, and there were 2 first sergeants in line behind me. And of course, they knew each other, and they were talking back and forth. And he said, well, why are you here? And he said, oh, man, I've got this airman who opened a checking account and then took the checks around and just wrote checks for everything. It had nothing to do in his mind with the amount of money he had in the bank.
Right.
And so that's where we're starting, is that level of knowledge. And then when everything is pretty much provided for the service member throughout their time in service, when they get out, they need a lot of help from this area. And, there's not many organizations like you that are focusing on that. And I just think that's really, really wonderful. I mean, it's so needed. And there's a lot of organizations like we give respite to families and veterans, but the VSOs out there that are helping them with education, that are helping them with job placement, with dealing with issues from TBI and PTS, providing these kind of resources to help them make that transition is just worth its weight in gold. It's just good work.
Well, the goal is somewhere we get ahead of it, right?
Yeah.
That's a nice thought. I don't know if we'll ever be there, in fairness to the need as we see it right now. But this is, again, that to us is that third pillar that is unique to us in ways that Tina and her program and the way at which the program works, we know we're making a difference. We just want to make a bigger difference.
Yeah. Let me talk to the listeners out there who have received assistance from the Purple Heart Foundation. If you're in a position today where you can help other veterans through the Purple Heart Foundation, you need to reach out, and you need to reach out right away. And you need to donate money to the foundation. Maybe you can't help them directly with the programs that they need right now, but any donation that you can make as a way to give back is going to help another veteran and another service member that's having trouble making that transition or just dealing with PTS or TBI. It's vitally important to keep donations and money flowing to the Purple Heart Foundation because the webpage, which is purpleheartfoundation.org, it's pretty simple. You want to go to the webpage and look at the resources that they have. There's plenty of links on there to places where veterans can get assistance with various issues and things that they're going through. And like most veteran service organizations out there, there is a focus on the webpage dealing with veteran suicide issues, which is huge for both VSOs. And you guys are no different. I know that you're paying attention to that and you're looking at that, and that's wonderful because that's a very big issue today.
Look, God bless you for bringing this up. It dovetails beautifully into that being our fourth pillar. Mental health. The case that I make in talking with most people is, again, if I'm a combat wounded soldier, we've seen the resiliency that they're going to heal. Physically, they're going to put on a prosthetic arm or a prosthetic leg if that's the injury that they have, and they're going to wake up every day and they're going to look at ways they can continue to give back.
Mm-hmm.
But the case I make from the mental health perspective is they're never going to be the same person again, right? So looking at, and in fact, just based on how we met at Brain Injury Services here locally in Fairfax County area, Andrew's someone that I've been talking to because, again, the program that we're trying to impact and make a difference to is how do we work with organizations that allow us to kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together and create a bigger picture.
Yeah.
So let me touch on the first relationship, and that was with a company called Reflex AI, who created a program called Home Team. What was incredible working with Sam and his team was Sam had been on some of the critical suicide hotlines and calls. Based on that, they went to Google. They received $1.5 million grant, and they were able to put together a program that, through AI technology, allows veterans to come in and understand empathy and hear communication and buzzwords to see that there's a veteran in trouble and to help that veteran with their mental health issues. And the case that they make is 95% of veterans said they would help a battle buddy in need with mental health issues, but only 25% said they were equipped to know how to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So the compelling part of this program is the ability to go in, and we received early release from Reflex AI with a couple other VSOs. But you go in and you interact with a character named Blake. And as we know, there's Blake Lively, female. There's Blake Shelton, male.
Mm-hmm.
So the ability to go in and just either look at questions that they want you to ask Blake, or you can just start typing, "Hey, Blake, how the hell are you today?" And the response simultaneous comes back, "Yeah, okay, but kind of just staying home, isolating a little bit right now." And your ability to either choose additional questions or to send back, "Well, what do you mean you're just kind of hanging tight?" "Well, playing video games, but we lost Charlie last week and just not in a good place."
Mm-hmm.
And if he says, again, "Haven't been sleeping well," all these things, and your response is, "Yeah, I'm not sleeping well either, sleep's overrated," you missed in that first chapter, which is about 8 minutes long, empathy,
Mm-hmm.
because the ability to go, wait, well, hold it. What do you mean you're not sleeping? What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Because we know with people not being able to sleep, and then they go days without sleeping, then they start to have some thoughts that aren't positive, productive thoughts.
Yeah.
As you continue through, based on truly veterans that had attempted suicide that have given real-time AI feedback to this program, you eventually realize that they are in a dark place. And you have to ask that tough question,
Mm-hmm.
Based on where you you don't mind me asking, are you thinking about suicide?
Mm-hmm.
And if that response is yes, then they found little things like, well, you know what? If I recall, you've got a pistol at your house. How about I swing by and either pick up the ammo or the gun? You help me decide which one.
Mm-hmm.
They feel like they're included in the conversation versus if you take their gun away, now they may get angry and that's their right. And they may go buy a gun and prove to you
Mm-hmm.
that they were going to accomplish what they set out to do
Yeah.
versus, hey, appreciate you coming by. And then you're able to put a pulse on it and you're able to then allow buddies to come in and play a role too.
Yeah.
That partnership for me is what really started to springboard to look at mental health. And I literally, on this, Larry, have puzzle pieces that I've cut out and Xeroxed and right up there. And we have Dashima that's going to be helping us with meditation and yoga. On the other end of that spectrum, we have hospice care. Because really what I'm trying to focus on in a lot of ways when I say pivot the foundation is what's the need
Mm-hmm.
and what does the military do that's the best of the best.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look at some of these things, certainly we know taps being played, no matter how many times you go to Arlington or Quantico or some of the other military funerals or bases for funerals, you're never prepared to hear taps at the end off in the distance being played and there's not a dry eye in the house.
Yeah.
But more importantly, soldiers are also pre-planning, which is about 2% of the population, and they're talking about celebration of life.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the trend is today. You know the number one thing put on tombstones today?
No.
QR codes.
Oh, wow.
And the thought behind that is, if you think about going to funeral homes, today everything is the photos up on the screen and the different things that honor those people and look at their celebration of life. We're right now working with Galler's Funeral Home and talking about some things that may be some additional content that may be podcast, short little video, but Galler's has done more funerals in Arlington Cemetery than any other funeral home. They once a quarter go to the Capitol and to National Cathedral to do dry runs of presidential or congressional or different ways at which they're being honored up on the Hill. But talking with Dwayne about that pre-planning celebration, it's the kindest thing you could ever do for your family. And the military does it extremely well.
Yeah.
Another quick note on that would be hospice care. We're partnering with the Capital Caring Group here. The compelling part of this and looking at the mental health piece is that puzzle for us is, one, we know there's a need for veterans that are alone. And if they don't get home, they're going to die in hospitals alone. So we're looking to help them through using our social media outreach and our website and other ways that we can be a resource to get drivers that are veteran drivers or those that want to support veterans and help get these veterans to die in their homes. At the same time, they have robotic pets. And the compelling part of this and looking at where remote monitoring and all these things are going.
Yeah.
We know that there's a large amount of veterans that eventually they or their spouse are dealing with early onset or dementia.
Yeah.
They've found through these robotic dogs and robotic cats that if you know you're going to leave the room and that creates angst for your loved one, the ability to take over this robotic cat and put it in the lap that to you and me may look like a stuffed toy, but to that person, they start to pet it and the cat starts to purr. They start to pat the dog on the back and the dog will bark and wag its tail and turn its head. So this remote monitoring is now starting to have us in conversations with companies that are working with caregivers. And because, again, veterans are leading the way with setting up long-term care and other things that they've been educated on to be able to put into their lives. These are ways we can create partnerships that not only impact veterans leading the way, but work in the commercial sector as well.
Yeah.
So lots of fun of where we're looking at the mental health piece. And if I can, just on another note, because this event's coming up, and in fact, I'd love to invite you if you can make it. Mark Riley is a retired sergeant major with the Honor Guard and Fife and Drum Corps. And Mark, in retiring, has set up the Washington Tattoo.
Oh, yes.
He's sponsored through the Edinburgh Tattoo, and Mark, to me, is, and certainly to his credit, has been recognized as one of the greatest military drummers current. So Mark has an event on Tuesday night called Tartan Day. We're working together on some different initiatives, and Mark is working with multiple organizations, but we know music heals. And in December of this year, we actually worked with George Mason together to do healing in the arts and talk about how the military is really trying to get at the forefront of programs that are working. And that's a big emphasis, again, on what we want to focus on. For too long, veterans have had to go through some of the traditional channels, and it hasn't worked. Well, let's focus on what's working, and let's work with those organizations and partner to get the word out and have a bigger difference. Mark's working really in two areas that we like to support. One is Rudiments to Opportunity, and that's working with disadvantaged youth. An $8 pair of drumsticks can change their lives. They go online, they learn the drum as a communication tool, flank left, flank right, fix bayonets. That information starts to translate of how they can go on to utilize that to be some of the best drummers in the world. The Rudiments to Recovery is working with veterans and an opportunity to reconnect, because we know music heals. And those same tunes that we learned at George Mason that can be detrimental for traumatic brain injury, if played differently and in different tones, different pitches, create happy endorphins. Your foot starts to tap, and the next thing you know, you're up and cutting the rug, dancing up a storm. So we know music has the opportunity to heal. And this is why that partnership with Mark and the Washington Tattoo and the Purple Heart and Mark and some of the other organizations he's working with, doing great things to make a difference. And we want to truly focus on what's working and what are those partnerships.
Wow.
A lot of fun in the direction we're going.
Well, you got your work cut out for you, that's for sure.
Yeah, but the benefit of this is that when you partner with people, everyone's carrying a load.
Yeah, that does help. It really does. Well, listen, I want to thank you for coming on today and, just letting everybody know exactly what the Purple Heart is, what the foundation does, the amazing work that the foundation does. Again, listeners, please check out the webpage. It's purpleheartfoundation.org. Make a donation, help support them, give back, and you really just have to take a look at the webpage and see. You're going to see a tremendous amount of resources for veterans, and it really encapsulates the work that you guys are doing. Please support them. Go there, take a look, and support them. For our listeners, we'll have another episode for you next Monday morning, 5 a.m., for those who like to get up early and listen to podcasts. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can reach us at podcast@willingwarriors.org. Until then, thanks for listening.
The Welcome Home podcast is brought to you by Willing Warriors, a nonprofit organization serving active duty service members and veterans since 2012. To learn more, please visit our webpage at willingwarriors.org.